Hi, I'm Michelle Livings for Finextra TV, and I'm joined by Peel Hunt's Gautam Pillai for this Predict 2025 interview about fintech trends. Gautam, lovely to have you here with me.
Great to be here. Thank you, Michelle.
So I thought we could start by looking at the bigger picture, because payments are transforming, and of course that's being driven by the new technology, but also changing consumer trends as well. So what are the trends shaping the picture at the moment?
Sure. I would say the conversation in global payments is threefold right now. Much of the buzz and excitement is around embedded payments, cross-border payments, and generative AI in payments. And if I think about these three technologies, what they're trying to do for businesses, the vendors who kind of work in these technologies are helping businesses make payment easier, faster, and more transparent for the consumers without giving up on security. And if I look at industry sources, embedded payments is expected to be growing at around close to mid-25, so 25% CAGR growth over the next 3-4 years. Generative AI is already cutting down fraud in the payment ecosystem by 30 to 40%, and is expected to be like a 11 billion industry soon, and embedded payments is a 138 billion industry in 2 years' time. So these are kind of very exciting areas currently, and happy to talk about it in much more detail.
Well, yeah, that's actually what I wanted to come onto next, because embedded payments, as you said, they're huge as a trend at the moment. How are they changing the way that businesses operate, but also how customers experience it as well?
Sure. Definitely the objective of embedded payments and what they're trying to do is reduce customer friction on payments and increase customer retention. I don't know if you have observed this. If you pay for a Uber Eats or a Uber taxi, you're no longer actually seeing the payments. You just swipe.
Absolutely.
Or Amazon, same thing. You just swipe and you are not really seeing the payment. In fact, in Uber Eats is a funny thing. You select the cart and you have a particular amount for the amount of the food you've ordered, but the actual bill is much higher because you add service charge and the delivery fee on top of it, which you're actually not seeing. Nope. You can see if you want to, but it's a much less frictionless process. What embedded payments is trying to be is replicate that world into every businesses. So if you think about it, and apart from these kind of big global e-commerce vendors, you go to a normal kind of e-commerce website, you might have observed that the time of checkout, you're taken to a different environment, which adds friction in the process. You start questioning, is it the right website, or is there a risk of losing your card details and stuff like that? And companies or businesses lose customers at that point. You've selected a lot of in the cart, but you're not checking out. What embedded payments try to do is embed the payment experience in the website or the app, and hence reduce friction for customers and increase customer retention for businesses. Obviously, while you're doing that, there is a risk of security, and the security kind of transcends across all three kind of themes which you talked about, because whenever payments is involved, hackers and bad actors are interested in that data. So obviously embedded payments have to take care of that security element as well. And when I think about UK companies which are facilitating embedded payments, and Peel Hunt has a vested interest in the UK market specifically, I would kind of call out perhaps two names, Modular and Go Cardless. And Modular provides APIs which can help embed payments into businesses and across sectors. And Go Cardless focuses more on recurring payments, like an insurance type payment or a bill payment and so on. Again, the objective of these companies is to have speed, a better user experience, and be transparent to customers.
Yeah. You also mentioned generative AI, so I wanted to come on to that next, because that's making headlines across industries. So what role does it play in payments specifically, and how do companies sort of balance security with privacy in these AI applications?
Sure, and you can't have a tech conversation these days without talking about AI.
No.
And generative AI is really, in my opinion, it's kind of disrupting payments world and payments landscape, in fact enhancing the experience for companies and so on. So we talked about in the embedded payments landscape that whenever payments is involved, security is a big issue. And what generative AI or generative AI applications do is to understand the patterns, payment patterns which has happened, and you can, obviously AI can simulate stuff and help the system understand different kind of fraud patterns and help reduce fraud in payments. That's in a very simplistic way how what generative AI could do. And companies are using it significantly. For example, I'm sure every bank is using it, but the neobanks in the UK, like the Starlings of the world, Monzo, Zopa, Revolut, obviously, are all using AI to protect customer funds and protect the transactions and so on. And they use different kind of methods for protecting customer data. So again, the friction is a big issue. And right now, you can open a bank account with your selfie and a photo of your passport or license. Every single app in your phone is controlled with your fingerprint or your face scan. So the risk of fraud is vast. Then it's great user experience, but the risk of fraud is there, and generative AI helps to kind of circumnavigate those issues and give businesses a way to protect the customers' data and funds and so on. Now, it's also important from a business standpoint. Again, payments is a highly regulated industry, and apart from that, there are laws like GDPR rules, data protection rules, and privacy rules, and so on. And GDPR is interesting. GDPR fines, I have read somewhere that you could be fined up to 4% of your global revenues if you're in breach of GDPR. So apart from these neobanks which are using AI technology to protect data and protect the customer privacy and so on, Form3 is an interesting UK private company which kind of gives them the arms to protect it using generative AI. So that's another name which I wanted to mention. And generally, I think I mentioned PCI DSS earlier, which is this payment security standard which you have to adhere to. So a lot of the vendors which, while using generative AI, make sure that you are adhering to these standards as well and providing the companies a product which, obviously UX is important, but without kind of compromising on security is a way a perfect generative AI fraud prevention product could work.
If we could now just finally switch to talking about the cross-border payments that you mentioned earlier, because we've got global e-commerce, of course, we've got the working from home culture as well, and they've all spiked a demand for these sort of cross-border international transactions. So how are companies specifically managing the security but also the privacy?
We're in very interesting point of time with respect to cross-border payments, and you rightly said, obviously e-commerce has kind of pushed it. People are traveling more. People are, there are a lot of people who travel and work, for example. And I would say the company or a few companies have really disrupted cross-border payments in the consumer world is a UK company, Wise, previously known as TransferWise. Revolut does a lot of cross-border kind of transactions as well. And this is interesting. So historically, if you go, let's say 10 or maybe 15 years back, to go to live holiday on Spain, you might need to go to HSBC or Citibank with your bank account and even perhaps a checkbook even, and get a bunch of euros or in cash or maybe
travelers' checks.
Correct, exactly.
Yeah.
Or you could get a prepaid card as well.
Yeah.
Now, banks use this kind of technology called correspondent banking network, and which kind of comes from the fact that not every bank is connected to every other bank in the world. So it's a kind of a chain network in a way. What these the cross-border payment companies like Wise try to do is they use a technology called netting, which kind of completely takes away the whole correspondent banking network loops and can kind of transact directly with one person to another. In netting, in very simple terms, is like a large Excel sheet. And if you think about, let's say, transactions in Euro and GBP, and you can imagine there might be thousands of transactions in a single day for different reasons. So imagine a large Excel sheet with a lot of plus and minus Euro and GBP, but in the end there's one net figure, which could be 100 Euro to GBP, and that's all Wise does. Everything else is an accounting entry. Right. Which makes that transaction a lot more faster, cheaper, and transparent. to the customers. So I think the consumer cross-border world is really, really disrupted. So obviously there's a US company called Remitly, which is doing quite well as well, and plenty of private companies in the space. While the consumer has been disrupted, B2B is a different beast on its own.
Right. Okay.
Now, if you think about the market, and you, as you said, consumer is a huge market. We're talking here trillions of transactions happening in a year. Business is 3 to 5x that. As you can imagine, businesses have to transact with other businesses. You have receivables and payables in different parts of the world. You might have to pay your employees in different parts of the world. So working capital management becomes very, very important, and having a very active FX risk management and payment strategy is super critical in the current cross-border world. So there's a massive UK success story, a company called Alpha Group, which has been in the forefront of FX risk management for corporates and financial institutions. I mean, I'm talking about a success story. They went from around under 10 million revenues in 2016 to currently around 130 million revenues, all organic kind of expansion. So you see the demand for those kind of solutions in the current world. So I think B2B is a bigger kind of a world where there'll be more companies, more vendors kind of facilitating that, and make it a bigger addressable market and a bigger revenue opportunity. So we have talked a lot about security in all of these themes, which is kind of changing the payments market. You would have seen that I talked about data verification and customer verification, KYC, KYB, and so on. And also in earlier we discussed about everything in your phone is controlled with your face and fingerprint. So that bit, ID verification, is becoming more critical in transactions, while you're opening a bank account, while you're doing a large transaction, and so on. So one of the UK companies, publicly listed companies, GB Group, is actually in the forefront of doing ID verification for customers, for consumers, when you're doing a bank transaction via Revolut or things like that. And the other technologies like tokenization, store minimal data in the data centers or have these compartments for different types of data. All these are different methods used by the vendors and the businesses to protect data and security.
That's really, really good to know. It's been a fascinating, really interesting discussion. So thank you so much, Gautam, for coming in today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Michelle.